You know this type of personality, the kind of person who always needs to dominate in every group situation. If you have somebody in your life, and there probably is somebody like this, maybe it's somebody at work, not a boss, but actually a coworker. Maybe it's somebody in your social group, in your group of friends. It could be anyone in a group where you are there and you are participating just like everybody else in some way or other. And yet, this one person, time and again, always needs to be in control, always needs to dominate. And a lot of times, the people around that person find them to be almost aggressive, pushy, controlling. And yet, a lot of times in these group situations, people don't really say anything. A lot of times, this person, this personality kind of gets away with it. And it's understandable why a lot of people tend to not want to deal with it, tend to not want to say anything to this person, certainly in a group situation. That could become really uncomfortable. It could feel awkward for everybody. Here's another reason, though, why I can understand why people don't necessarily try to address the issue with the person who always needs to dominate in group situations. One basic reason why is because I think that there's this understanding that we have that this type of personality is not easy to change. So it makes perfect sense if somebody wouldn't feel comfortable trying to bring up an issue with somebody when deep down they don't believe it would make any difference, when deep down the personality who always needs to dominate, or I would suggest steamroll, the personality that kind of steamrolls everything. Well, most people understand a steamroller is going to steamroll. And even if you try to bring things up with them, you try to change them, it's going to be very difficult to change. It is going to be very difficult to change. It doesn't mean that people should allow themselves to be doormats in any way and just allow the dominating person to steamroll everything. Of course, in situations where anything really bad is happening, any kind of abusive treatment, that needs to be addressed immediately anytime there are safety concerns. But the reality is, a lot of times it doesn't reach that level. Whether it's a bunch of parents who are volunteers at their kid's school or a kid's event, whether it's just a group of friends out on a weekend, whether it's some sort of, intramural sports tournament among adults on the weekends, there are always these situations where it is really just a group of peers or equals, and yet one person tends to dominate. So, what do you do if this is a situation that you have to deal with? That person might, colloquially speaking, drive you nutty. They might make you feel so frustrated, angry, and just after a while, you get exasperated. It's like, oh, enough. Gosh, doesn't everyone else see this too? That's something that is very natural to think in these situations. Why isn't anybody else saying anything? How do we let them get away with it? Well, one thing I want to share about this personality is they like dominating. They like being in control. They like calling the shots. It is so natural to them. And everybody around them is thinking, but nobody asked you to. Nobody anointed you the group leader. Nobody said, hey, we really need somebody to be in charge of us here. This personality who always needs to dominate, they really like it. They get gratification. It's like their dopamine receptors are probably just firing nonstop. So, a few things that you can do when you're in this position is, first of all, you can ask yourself whether this is a group situation, a group dynamic that you want to continue to be in. Sometimes people leave group situations because it's just simply not comfortable and one person just really kind of ruins it for them. And if that's you, well, that's a decision that you as an adult can make. Another option that some people find workable is when they know a particular personality is going to be involved or is going to be present, they decide not to attend that day. Another option that can work for people is not to say, I'm going to leave this group situation, this dynamic entirely going forward. I'm going to just delete myself from the equation because I just feel that uncomfortable. Another option would be instead of that to say, I'm just going to take a temporary break from that. So take a little hiatus. Now, if you choose not to do any of these things and you decide just to continue to participate as it is, and you know this person is just going to keep dominating and keep frustrating you, here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to get to a point where you lose your frustration, you lose your cool, and you end up saying something mean or sharp or cruel to that person, especially in a group situation. That can kind of bring up a lot of old childhood dynamics where people did that kind of thing on the playground as kids, but we as adults really need to do a step far beyond that and really kind of manage our emotions or figure out if somebody or something just frustrates us that much, what changes we need to make so that we can continue to engage in more neutral, kind of socially appropriate adult behavior. So don't give yourself permission just because somebody annoys the heck out of you. Don't give yourself permission to lose your cool and shame them or be cruel in a group setting. Another thing I really want to caution people about is to not do something called triangulation, which is to go to that person, to say things to that person who's annoying and steamrolling, and to say, well, listen, this is how I feel. And everybody else feels that way too. In that way, you are triangulating others into the equation. If you really have an issue with somebody and you want to address it, it's reasonable to address it directly, one on one. And just remember, keep your tone of voice neutral and really try to avoid saying cruel things. Ask yourself in the moment, what will probably result in the best change in behavior? What do I need to do in this situation to cause the best possible change? And it's not being cruel and mean or lying or insulting. That's simply not going to work. So, avoiding triangulation, I think, is important because I think that as adults, the goal is really that we do better than that. And then finally, the last thing I really want to encourage people to avoid is talking badly about that individual behind the person's back. It's one thing to contact another person that you're friends with in that group setting, outside of the setting, and say, hey, can I confide something that is really frustrating me? And it's fair for people to be able to vent their feelings, and maybe the other person will share their feelings too. But what makes it talking behind a person's back is to talk badly about that person, to go to other people and talk negatively about them, but then to that individual, the dominating person's face, to act like, well, you're just the friendliest person in the world. That's really not being genuine. That's not really being honest. So, I hope these reminders and kind of tips have been helpful if you are managing a situation where there is somebody who is dominating every situation. I'm Dr. Seth, psychologist, and hopefully I have some other videos here among my hundreds of self help videos on my YouTube channel that you could find helpful. Have a good one, everybody.